Bulletwitch, a game that is so unbelievably bad, you could almost say it's good. And that statement is what I absolutely love most about this video game hobby we all share in. Because while a game can truly be terrible in almost every regard on a fundamental level, when you look at each individual part and how they come together, you could still find something that grabs hold of you that leads to it just being a fun experience, despite how bad it is. Which Bulletwitch is one of those games for me, a game that honestly has a somewhat weird and wacky development history that led to it being one of the worst, if not the worst, exclusives to ever be released on the Xbox 360, which the best way to really understand all of this is to start with what is usually the most important part of any game, and that's the gameplay. Though the funny thing about Bulletwitch's gameplay is there's really 3 different versions of the game that have some big effects on the overall gameplay experience the game provides. There's the original that released first in Japan back in 2006 as what you could basically call a launch title for the Japanese Xbox 360, releasing 6 months after the 360 released in Japan, which was developed by a studio called Kavia, which also developed notable games before and after Bulletwitch like Drakengard 1 and 2, Ghost in the Shell, and Nier before shutting down in 2010, leading to various members of the team going to various studios. But backtracking back to 2007, publishing a Bulletwitch outside of Japan was handled by Atari, and with the porting of the game came a couple of notable changes. First, they reduced the damage of your primary weapon, and the reason Atari wanted this change is because Bulletwitch is more than just a third-person shooter. It also featured various spells you could use alongside your gun, and they really wanted to highlight that part of the game's mechanics. They also claimed to improve enemy AI, textures, controls, and the collision system, but this ultimately turned out to be a lie that anyone who played both Japanese and ported versions could easily see. Then finally, they reduced enemy health pools, which really didn't make the game feel any better. While yes, reducing enemy health made spells even more effective, but since they also reduce your primary weapon's damage, it really just led to so many enemies being nothing but bullet sponges that it really brought the experience down. Then on top of that, all of the DLC featured in the Japan version was free compared to the port that changed it to where you now had to pay for that DLC. So while it should have been a better experience, it simply wasn't. But you know what was a good experience? The final version of the game that was ported to PC in 2018, which I would consider the best way to play Bulletwitch. But before I can explain what makes it easily the best version of the game, I want to dive into the Xbox 360 version and just the general gameplay mechanics that I both love and get drove crazy by, since there was so much potential here just wasted away with this game.
Witches don't need prayers.
So, as I mentioned before, Bulletwitch is a third-person shooter with spells thrown into the mix. You play as Alicia Claus, and no, you're not getting any cheesy Christmas jokes from me, though it is very tempting. But then again, it's almost a joke in itself when you hear what Alicia's main weapon or gun is called, the oh-so-original Gunrod. Anyways, the Gunrod features 4 different forms that can be changed to on the fly, with one of the coolest weapon swap animations ever made. It's like a helicopter blade full of destruction, but the 4 forms are a machine gun, shotgun, cannon, and Gatling gun. Then when it comes to spells, you have 9 total spells used to assist you in combat that can be weaved between gunfire to maximize your killing ability. At least that's what I would like to say, but so many of the spells have pointless animations that slow down the gameplay massively, and by the time you put in any significant amount of time into the game, you will grow tired of these. At least I did. Something about a lifeless animation as you wait for a spell to be cast just sucks the soul from your body, and what's even worse, most of the spells in the game just aren't worth using. The main reason I say this is because there are basically 2 spells that just drastically outperform everything else in the game: Element Shot and Raven's Panic. Starting with Element Shot, which is my favorite spell in the game, it adds a special elemental effect and ability depending on what gun form you have equipped. It adds fire to the machine gun that allows you to burn enemies, wind to your shotgun that pushes objects away, holy to your cannon which makes it so you can zoom in with a sniper-like scope. Then finally, the Gatling gun gets electricity, which allows you to send currents between enemies, shocking them in place. All of these have their uses, though the flaming machine gun probably outperforms everything else 99% of the time. It's just so damn good and doesn't require much resources to execute, and the reason I say this is because in Bulletwitch, you have a purple magic bar, and depending on what spell you cast, it will not only eat some of your magic bar, it will also reduce the total cap of the bar, which can only be increased back to its normal size by killing enemies with your gun, which is where a weird stupid feature, at least to me, comes into play. And that's the fact that your weapons cost magic to reload. While this won't reduce the total cap of your magic bar, it can make it so you're cut off from some of your Gunrod forms during stressful situations when your magic cap gets super low from casting spells. To me, that's just not a good gameplay experience. I shouldn't be blocked from being able to reload my weapons, which is why I said the machine gun with elemental shot is just the best combo. Elemental shot doesn't lower your total magic bar cap by that much, and no matter how low your cap gets, you will basically always be able to reload your machine gun. So the game does a terrible job of forcing you into this gameplay style, even though other spells can have their uses. Though I will say, as good as this is, and while it's my favorite combo, nothing breaks the game more than Raven's Panic. This spell is ridiculous and basically makes you immortal to normal enemies, because when you cast this spell, swarms of ravens will stop enemies in their tracks, leaving you free access to kill them, which allows you to refill the cap of your magic bar, so you can then cast the spell again and repeat. This really does, in most situations, just break the game. It can make even the hardest difficulty a breeze, but outside of those two spells, everything else is super situational. Willpower allows you to push objects into enemies or out of your way, which I must admit can be very fun to do, though sometimes the objects just don't do anything to the enemies, and since this was obviously added in to show off your physics engine to people who played your game, you probably should have made sure it worked perfectly. Next, you have Rose Spear, which is absolute trash. While the idea behind the spell is interesting, in practice it does nothing as you throw out a rose petal and watch spears rise from the ground just to miss every enemy on the screen. Though when it does pierce them, it's a really cool visual that's about like throwing a shish kebab on a grill and watching it get burned. Next, you have Ancient Wall, which can definitely save your life at times, like when you need to regenerate health, since unlike the magic bar, even though your health cap gets reduced as you take damage, it will not only regenerate up to the cap like the magic bar, it will push the cap higher till your HP bar is back to normal. Though I would say the Ancient Wall's primary function is to mainly keep you from getting wiped out by the snipers in the game that kill you in one shot, since they have the ultimate aimbot, and I don't know what the hell the devs were thinking making them like that. Who knows? Maybe they were fans of Halo 2 and wanted to bring that suffering to more people. Finally, you have Sacrifice and the 3 great spells. Sacrifice just simply allows you to heal people that are down like civilians. Why would you want to do this? Well, Bulletwitch is what I would call an arcade shooter, where there are stages you play through, and at the end of each stage you get a score and ranking depending on various actions, which are enemies killed, civilians that survived, and time passed. So you can see where Sacrifice comes into play. Then just building off of that, you get rewarded skill points depending on how good you did, which is in turn used to upgrade your weapon, spells, health, and magic regeneration. I don't mind this system since it rewards me for learning the mechanics of the game. But what really sucks about this though is the fact so many spells are so worthless in accomplishing this goal of achieving the highest score possible. A game should lean into mastering every aspect of it, but unfortunately Bulletwitch doesn't do that, which is a shame since you can't upgrade everything in one playthrough, so it could have added so much replayability in terms of initial runs if more spells were more effective, since you could have experimented with different playstyles, and while you could still technically do this, you're basically just massively handicapping yourself for no reason. Definitely when you look at the fact that you only start with the machine gun form of the Gunrod, and it takes quite a few skill points to unlock the other 3 variants, though I do want to throw out that the shotgun, at least in the Xbox 360 version of Bulletwitch, is absolute trash, and not even worth looking at. When a shotgun can't one-shot an enemy at close range, you're a disgrace in my eyes to all video game shotguns.
Taste fear as your soul burns away.
Now let's switch the attention back to those 3 great spells I mentioned. While I do feel like a badass after unleashing them thanks to the sheer spectacle of them, they can be very annoying in their own right despite being the best spells in the game on paper. Now these spells are gifted to the player as they progress throughout the game, which consists of 6 stages. So first you get lightning about halfway through stage 1, which is this super effective damage dealing bolt of lightning that can decimate groups of enemies in the area of the strike, which makes it great for taking out tanks or barricades. You get tornado near the end of stage 4 while you're fighting off waves of enemies in a base, and this, as you can expect, conjures up a giant tornado that destroys everything in its path and is supposed to be great for taking out helicopters, but honestly it's just so unpredictable and wild that half the time I just miss most of the enemies I'm trying to kill with it and end up just smashing myself like a complete idiot with the debris thrown by the tornado. So I tend to just use the lightning or the cannon Gunrod to destroy helicopters, though I will say the tornado physics and appearance is really sick for a game that came out in 2006. Then last but not least, you have Meteor, a super devastating AoE attack that literally destroys everything. You, enemies, buildings, even the neighbor's dog isn't safe from the destructive force of this beast of a spell that you get during the final stage. It really is an awesome ability. Unfortunately, my biggest issue with these spells, outside of the ridiculously long and awkward animations casting them, is the fact that outside the lightning, which you can pinpoint on a target, which even casting that can be annoying, since if you're shot while aiming the spell or just misclick outside of a target, which both cancel the attack, is the fact that because of how unpredictable Meteor and Tornado are, along with the insanely high magic cost to cast them, that it handicaps you till you build back up your magic bar cap. So basically, it's really not worth using them most of the time. Definitely on the highest difficulty, which is Hell mode, where if an enemy so much as looks at you, your life is over. Really disappointing, because these spells really are awesome and fun to use, but from a gameplay standpoint, they could have been so much better. Like, there's no leveling system for the great spells. Would have been cool if maybe you could have had an upgrade where they use like half the magic they normally do, so you could more strategically use them alongside your other spells at higher difficulties. Though despite these flaws with the weapons and spells, I still found it fun running around blasting incredibly dumb AI with what I consider one of the coolest ideas for a weapon in gaming history, alongside some interesting spells. But now I think it's time to dive into what really is the most underwhelming part of Bulletwitch for me, and that is the level design. Now, when I'm looking at a game that is stage-based like Bulletwitch is, I'm really looking out for 3 different things. I want to be properly rewarded at the end of each level for my actions. Bulletwitch absolutely nails this thanks to not only rewarding skill points based on how good you do, but there are also leaderboards where you can register your score against other players with special rankings based on how high your score is. Next, I want to see set-piece moments in every mission that really makes them stand out from each other. Well, Bulletwitch falls pretty flat in this regard, though there are 2 set-piece moments that really stand out to me that are genuinely awesome, and these are the 2 main bosses of the game. One takes place on top of a plane, which is just incredibly awesome visually, and the battle itself is fun, making you have to defend the plane from these drilling eyeballs that fills up your magic gauge when you kill them so you can cast lightning to take down the boss. Then the final boss is just an awesome fight as you work alongside the humans to take him down with everything you got in a battle that has you battling in the streets of the city with the buildings around you getting destroyed as you put an end to the creature's reign. And honestly, these boss fights really made me wish every level ended with a boss fight. Would have made the entire experience tremendously better. Now, last but not least, the last thing I'm looking for is I want the level design to be engaging and interesting. Bulletwitch fails miserably at this. Outside of the fact the second and final levels are basically the exact same layout with minor differences in pathways open up, the levels are super linear and overly large, which leads you to believe there would be hidden secrets or collectibles. There isn't, which is really dumb if I'm being honest. I get wanting to make these grand open stages to push the limits of the Xbox 360, but you have to make these areas interesting to explore to justify making them so big, or else you're just wasting resources for no reason, especially when you consider how straining the physics had to have been on the original 360 at the time. I know when I was playing Bulletwitch on my 360 for this video, it sounded like it was going nuclear the entire time. Which, don't get me wrong, while I can ultimately respect how ambitious they were trying to go with the game, they had to sacrifice way too much near the end of the game's development cycle. I mean, it was originally planned for the PS2, but after the dev team got a chance to sit down with the Xbox 360 to see the dev tools it had along with its online features, the devs went all in on making it a title for the 360, which made them overconfident in what they could do just to end up being limited by the power of the 360, causing them to cut details from the game to compensate for how big they made the environments, like it running at 60 FPS, glass breaking, bullet marks on surfaces, and Alicia being able to stand properly on sloped surfaces. And I know you're probably looking at these environments and probably thinking that compared to today's standards and even to a lot of indie games, they are tiny. But this is 2006 we are talking about. Between the size of the environments with this ridiculous physics engine that not only lets you destroy various objects and even push those objects with your magic, it lets enemies like the walnut heads pick up these obstacles as well and throw them around, which are these big brain creatures who block your progress with barriers throughout levels that are honestly laughably easy to kill, and I really wish they would have been more aggressive with the obstacles they picked up. But between you and them being able to do that really was impressive for the time. Unfortunately, the game suffered because of what they tried to do with these physics. It runs terribly with the FPS dropping all the time. You get caught on geometry. The game in general has an incredibly generic look to it with just how poor everything comes together in the environments. Definitely compared to how cool the monsters like the Geist or how the main character Alicia looks. It almost has an Unreal Engine asset flip look to it. I don't know how else to put it, which graphically, to me, makes it one of the ugliest games imaginable, with aggressive popping and lighting that would make you cry yourself to sleep at night. So I really do believe if they would have scaled down the levels, added more detail and depth instead of having these large open environments that you move painfully slow through since your only movement options are a slow crouch walk and a ridiculously but fun dodge mechanic that has you flying through the air, the game would have been way better. Heck, even little details like Alicia actually holding her gun correctly would have went a long way. But staying on topic, I will say though, one of the biggest redeeming qualities in terms of level design are the bonus concept missions you could download as DLC. These featured various modifiers to the gameplay that changes up how you approach different levels, whether that's beating a time limit, every enemy being able to kill you in one shot, or hunting down endless walnut heads. These concept missions are probably the best part about Bulletwitch, and just like with the main story stages, you record scores for them as well. Though at this point, you're probably thinking there is no hope for this game to truly be redeemed. Well, guess what? There is, and that's where the PC version built off of the Japanese version of Bulletwitch comes into play, and yes, I know, is it really an Xbox exclusive if it's on PC? Yes, I do believe it is. I mean, it was only available on the 360 consoles for 12 years, and in this day and age, Xbox console exclusives are all on PC and Xbox. So I think it still counts, plus the version on PC is significantly different compared to the 360 version, so they do provide different gameplay experiences, but what makes the PC version so much better than its 360 counterparts? Well, the publishers and devs over at Xseed Games and Marvelous thought the game had potential to reach a moderate audience with some upgrades, which honestly respect them for thinking the game had any redeeming qualities, but the various improvements they made were pretty massive. These included graphical polishes like cleaner and brighter visuals, menus load faster, which is nice because the quality of the UI looks like it ate up half the budget with how over the top it is. Also, concept missions display by the correct numbers compared to the 360 version, and you don't have to buy them. Skins actually display correctly every time instead of occasionally breaking when going to select them. They made FPS improvements, allowing for a variety of FPS options to be selected from 30 FPS to unlimited. They made enemies no longer be bullet sponges and improved AI even further on monsters like the Gigas, so they would be more aggressive. Alicia now pulls out her gun faster and it takes longer for her to lower it, improving gameplay flow. Controls are 10 times better. I had both versions of the game up at the same time to feel the difference, and holy cow, does the PC version feel like butter compared to the 360 version. Also, the shotgun is now actually decent, and last but not least, they added a dash, so now moving across levels is no longer a pain in the ass. Though it is very janky at times, because the dash was originally created as a debug feature for the devs, but they decided it simply made the game better. Though you can break quite a few levels with this dash ability, hence it being a debug feature, which has made the PC version of Bulletwitch the preferred way for people to play who like to speedrun the game, which I can confirm, the dash literally makes the game way more fun, and it doesn't completely take away the integrity of the game, since if you're interested in racking up a high score, you need to be killing enemies and not dashing past them, so there's a good balance there. Also, once again, I need to state, the game is really fun to speedrun. Instead of diving into making the script like I should have right away, I spent like 4 hours speedrunning the game after completing everything because I really was just having a blast doing that. Plus it helps the game is super short, probably taking between 3 to 5 hours for a first playthrough, so messing up a speedrun isn't that bad. Also, if it wasn't for the game having an achievement that requires you to play for 15 hours, you could easily 100% the game in 10 hours maximum. At least on PC with the dash feature, might be a little longer on the 360. With that said, the PC version is still not perfect. The menu used to select your spells is still super annoying since it still takes up a big chunk of your screen, the melee attack is still absolutely worthless and could have used more power, though it does look very smooth at higher frame rates, which I appreciate. Also, some things still break, like music not playing when it's supposed to, or the fact that for some reason cutscenes run way worse in the PC version compared to the 360 version, which I found really interesting. Though the 360 cutscenes do have some weird transitions compared to the PC version, you also still get caught on some dumb geometry and so on, but it is the definitive way to play Bulletwitch, and I highly recommend you go this route if you want to play this game. Definitely if you want to experience one of the worst stories in voice acting in any video game out there.
You're wrong. I never smile.
Sorry, I saw you smile just now.
That's right, even the story, while I will say is very interesting in concept as it smashes together Western and Japanese cultures in a way that truly could have been amazing, falls short mainly due to the game just not being long enough, so you never really get a chance to see any of the characters get fleshed out, which there's really only 3 characters in the game. Obviously, Alicia Claus, the main character, and who just so happens to have a demonic voice in her head known as the Darkness that helps boost your powers throughout the game and also offers some terrible comic relief at times with this overly aggressive screen effect whenever he talks. Then you have the also masculine Maxwell Cougar, who leads a human resistance group against the large hordes of demons that plague the earth, because Alicia's father unleashed them all when he sacrificed himself to bring Alicia back to life after she died in a plane crash, which is obviously how she got her powers, and the game does a great job of playing off of this plane crash. If you pay close enough attention, anytime Alicia rides on any kind of flying vehicle in the game, it crashes. So there's some hidden jokes in there, though ultimately when Alicia finally reunites with her father to close the demonic gate he opened, it's so terribly done that what should have been the biggest moment of the game turns out terrible between the horribly written dialogue and pacing.
Alicia, what are you waiting for? Kill that man.
This man who allowed the demons into this world, who turned the earth into the living hell that it's become.
Another thing is Maxwell carries a lot of the cutscenes with him and Alicia. Most of the time Alicia is just very quiet and brooding, while Maxwell is over the top and very loud trying to break down Alicia's barriers, which this kind of dynamic could have been awesome if these two characters could have had more time together. What's even funnier about these two, and even the Darkness voice inside Alicia's head, is the fact when it comes to the English voice cast, you could tell they just didn't care about the performance they were putting out. And it's not like the voice actors were some nobodies. Alicia is played by Sarah Natachoni, the voice of Ash Ketchum. Darkness is played by Roger Parsons, the narrator of the first 6 Pokemon seasons, and Maxwell is played by none other than the man himself, Sean Schemmel, the voice of Goku. So this is a very talented cast of voice actors, and this is probably the worst work they have ever done, which really just adds to the overall absurdity of this damn game. Though I will say, despite how bad their performances are, nothing beats how overly cheesy the guy's voice acting comes off.
Before you kill me, let me say my prayers. Prayers? You should have done that before.
Which is ultimately why, despite how dreadful this game is, I absolutely love it. It's one of the first games I ever picked up back in the day used from the evil overlords known as GameStop, and I still have that copy to this day, which I'm glad I have since copies of the game on the 360 are starting to go for way too much. Used copies selling for around $70 and sealed going for up to $200, which I'm not a fan of, but at the same time I kind of get it. The game sold incredibly poorly. I believe it sold just around 30,000 copies total, maybe a little more. It's hard to really pinpoint how it really done. Then the Point 2 PC only made around $40,000 to $50,000 profit from what I could find, which isn't much better. But with the Xbox 360 marketplace shutdown, and the only way to play the game on console is through a physical copy, which at this point, you can't even download the bonus concept missions, so you're missing out on half the game basically, though I suppose that adds to the novelty of it now. Anyways, just as I said at the beginning of this video, sometimes a game is so bad it's good, and Bulletwitch will forever be that game for me. A game I absolutely enjoyed, but from the awesome concept of the game being terribly executed, the poor performances from the insane voice acting cast, and just the endless bad choices made by the devs, I can't help but say it really is the worst Xbox 360 exclusive made to this day, but it's a game that I truly hope someday gets a remake or sequel.